In 1958, more than a dozen African territories faced a historic decision. France offered them a choice: remain in a new political structure called the French Community, keeping strong economic and strategic ties with Paris, or vote for immediate, full independence. At first glance, it seemed like a step toward freedom. But independence on paper does not always mean independence in reality. When political sovereignty is negotiated within economic dependency, how much power truly shifts. To understand modern West and Central Africa, from currency debates to military agreements, we must go back to 1958, because that year did not simply end colonial rule. It redesigned it. The late 1950s were a turning point worldwide. Across Asia and Africa, colonial empires were collapsing. France had already fought a long and costly war in Indochina. Algeria was in the midst of a violent struggle for independence. The global tide was moving towards self-determination. Yet France still controlled vast territories in West and Central Africa. Charles de Gaulle returned to power in 1958 during a political crisis in France. He understood that direct colonial administration was no longer sustainable. So instead of resisting decolonization entirely, France proposed a new structure, the French Community. The French Community was introduced via a constitutional referendum in 1958. It promised internal self-government for African territories, but France would maintain influence over foreign policy, defense agreements, economic integration, currency systems. Territories had to vote. Yes, remain inside this new structure. No, leave immediately and assume full independence. For many leaders, the decision was far from simple. Independence is not just symbolic. It requires functioning administrations, financial institutions, diplomatic networks, and military capacity. Many feared economic shock if they left abruptly. So most voted yes. One country chose differently, Guinea. Led by Ahmed Sékou Touré, Guinea's position was clear. We prefer freedom in poverty to riches in slavery. France reacted swiftly. Civil servants left. Technical personnel withdrew. Equipment and records were removed. Infrastructure and administrative systems were disrupted almost overnight. Historians debate whether this was retaliation or standard procedure, but the effect was clear. Guinea faced immense institutional challenges immediately. By 1960, the French Community was dissolving. One by one, countries transitioned to full sovereignty. Senegal, Mali, Ivory Coast, Niger, Chad, Cameroon, Central African Republic. But independence did not mean separation. New agreements were signed covering defense, trade, technical assistance, currency. The CFA franc remained in use in many states, tied to the French treasury. Supporters argued it provided stability. Critics said it limited monetary sovereignty. Political independence had arrived. Economic interdependence remained. The CFA franc is central to this story. It offered a fixed exchange rate, convertibility guarantees, and partial reserves held in France. Proponents say it protects against inflation and stabilizes trade. Critics argue it restricts financial freedom and symbolizes ongoing external influence. This tension between stability and autonomy reflects a broader question. Is short-term dependence a necessary step toward long-term independence? The term neo-colonialism emerged in the 1960s. It describes situations where political independence exists, but economic control remains external. Some African intellectuals argued that formal empires ended, but financial leverage continued. Others contend that newly independent states lacked infrastructure, capital, and global bargaining power. From this perspective, France's continued agreements were pragmatic, not coercive. Yet history shows the transition was complex, negotiated, and often uneven. This period is not just historical. It shapes modern debates on military presence in Africa, currency reform, trade dependency, and Pan-African economic integration. The French Community represents a unique model of decolonization, not sudden collapse, but structured transition. The real question is not whether independence occurred. It did. The question is, how do nations move from political sovereignty to full economic agency? Understanding 1958 helps us understand today, and that conversation is still unfolding.